That evening, the members of our party, feeling somewhat tired after the strenuous program of the day, I went alone with Abdul Reese for a walk through the picturesque Arab quarter. Though I had seen it by day, I wished to study the alleys and bazaars in the dusk, when rich shadows and mellow gleams of light would add to their glamour and fantastic illusion. The native crowds were thinning, but were still very noisy and numerous when we came upon a knot of reveling Bedouins in the Sukan Nahazan, or bazaar of the coppersmiths. Their apparent leader, an insolent youth with heavy features and saucily cocked tarbrush, took some notice of us, and evidently recognized with no great friendliness my competent but unadmittedly supercilious and sneeringly disposed guide. Perhaps I thought he presented that odd reproduction of the Sphinx's half-smile which I had often remarked with amused irritation. Or perhaps he did not like the hollow and sepulchral resonance of Abdul's voice. At any rate, the exchange of ancestrally opprobrious language became very brisk, and before long Ali Ziz, as I heard the stranger called when called by no worse name, began to pull violently at Abdul's robe, an action quickly reciprocated, and leading to a spirited scuffle in which both the combatants lost their secretly cherished headgear and would have reached an even dire condition had I not intervened and separated them by main force. My interference, at first seemingly unwelcome on both sides, succeeded at last in effecting a truce. Solemnly, each belligerent composed his wrath and his attire, and with an assumption of dignity as profound as it was sudden, the two formed a curious pact of honor, which I soon learned is a custom of great antiquity in Cairo, a pact for the settlement of their differences by means of a nocturnal fist fight atop the Great Pyramid, long after the departure of the last moonlight sightseer. Each duelist was to assemble a party of seconds, and the affair was to begin at midnight, proceeding by rounds in the most civilized possible fashion. In all this planning there was much which excited my interest. The fight itself promised to be unique and spectacular, while the thought of the scene on that hoary pile overlooking the antediluvian plateau of Giza under the wan moon of the pallid small hours appealed to every fiber of imagination in me. A request found Abdul exceedingly willing to admit me to his party of seconds, so that all the rest of the early evening I accompanied him to various dens in the most lawless regions of the town, mostly northeast of the Esbekia, where he gathered one by one a select and formidable band of congenial cutthroats as his pugilistic background. Shortly after 9, our party mounted on donkeys bearing such royal or tourist reminiscent names as Ramses, Mark Twain, J.P. Morgan, and Minnehaha, edged through the street labyrinths, both oriental and occidental, crossed the muddy and mast-forested Nile by the bridge of the bronze lions, and cantered philosophically between the lepkas on the road to Giza. Slightly over 2 hours were consumed by the trip, toward the end of which we passed the last of the returning tourists, saluted in the last inbound trolley car, and were alone with the night and passed at the spectral moon. Then we saw the vast pyramids at the end of the avenue, ghoulish with the dim of atavistical menace, which I had not seemed to notice in the daytime. Even the smallest of them held a hint of the ghastly, for was it not in this that they had buried Queen Nitocris alive in the 6th dynasty? Subtle Queen Nitocris, who once invited all her enemies to a feast in the temple below the Nile and drowned them by opening the water gates. I recall that the Arabs whisper things about Nitocris and shun the third pyramid at certain phases of the moon. It must have been over her that Thomas More was brooding when he wrote a thing muttered about by Memphian boatmen. Quote, the subterranean nymph that dwells mid sunless gems and glorious hid, the lady of the pyramid. Unquote. As early as we were, Ali Ziz and his party were ahead of us, for we saw that their donkeys outlined against the desert plateau at Kafr al-Haram, towards which squalid Arab settlement close to the Sphinx we had diverged instead of following the regular road of the Mina house, where some sleepy, inefficient police might have observed and halted us. Here were filthy Bedouins stabled camels and donkeys in the rock tombs of Khephr's courtiers. We were led up the rocks and over the sand to the Great Pyramid, up whose time-worn sides the Arabs swarmed eagerly, Abdul Rees offering me the assistance I did not need. Arabs swarmed eagerly, Abdul Rees. As most travelers know, the actual apex of the structure had long been worn away, leaving a reasonably flat platform 12 yards square. On this eager pinnacle, a squared circle was formed, and for a few minutes the sardonic desert moon leered down upon a battle which, but for the quality of the ringside cries, might have occurred at some minor athletics club in America. As I watched it, I felt that some of our less desirable institutions were not lacking. For every blow, feint, and defense bespoke quote-unquote stalling. To my not inexperienced eye, it was quickly over, and despite my misgivings as to methods, I felt a sort of propriety pride when Abdul Rees was adjudged the winner. Reconciliation was phenomenally rapid, and amidst the singing, fraternizing, and drinking which followed, I found it difficult to realize that a quarrel had ever occurred. Oddly enough, I myself seemed to be more of a center of notice than the antagonist, and from my smattering of Arabic, I judged that they were discussing my professional performances and escapes from every sort of manacle and confinement, in a matter which indicated not only a surprising knowledge of me, but a distinct hostility and skepticism concerning my feats of escape. It gradually dawned on me that this elder of magic of Egypt did not depart without leaving traces, and that fragments of a strange secret lore and the priestly cult practices have survived surreptitiously among the fellaheen to such an extent that the prowess of a strange Hawaii or magician is resented and disputed. I thought of how much my hollow-voiced guide Abdul Rees looked like an old Egyptian priest or pharaoh or smiling sphinx, and wondered. Suddenly something happened which in the flesh proved the correctness of my reflections and made me curse the denseness whereby I accepted this night's events as any other than empty and malicious frame-up they now showed themselves to be. Without warning, and doubtless in answer to some subtle sign, from Abdul, the entire band of Bedouins precipitated itself upon me, and having produced heavy ropes, soon had me bound as securely as I ever was bound in the course of my life, either on the stage or off. I struggled at first, but soon saw that one man could make no headway against a band of over 20 sinewy barbarians. My hands were tied behind my back, my knees bent to the full extent, and my wrists and ankles were stoutly linked together with unyielding cords. A stifling gag was forced in my mouth, and blindfold fastened tightly over my eyes. Then, as the Arabs bore me aloft on their shoulders and began a jouncing descent of the pyramid, I heard the taunts of my late guide Abdul, who mocked and jeered delightedly in his hollow voice, and assured me that I was soon to have my quote-unquote magic powers put to a supreme test, which will quickly remove any egotism I might have gained during triumphing over all the tests offered by America and Europe. Egypt, he reminded me, is very old and full of inner mysteries and antique powers not even conceivable to the experts of today.